isn't community a wonderful, beautiful part of our lives? We're never alone. And even when we're away from one another, we know we're not alone, especially when people communicate with us. And not very long ago, Jane received a communication via email, I would think. And we begin our time together this afternoon with these words. We come together from the diversity of our grieving, to gather in the warmth of this community, extra warm community, giving stubborn witness to our belief that in times of sadness, there is time for laughter. In times of darkness, there will also be light. May we hold fast to the conviction that what we do with our lives matter, and that a caring world is possible after all. And so welcome, and we're about to sing what was one of Gordon's very favorite hymn, particularly when he was on Cuttyhunk. It's hymn number 148. It is printed in your bulletin, and or is it not?
It is not.
It is not. It is in the red book in front of you, and we're going to sing the first and third verses. Some of you may have to share a little. So let's stand. Welcome. Musician. As we sing the first and third verses.
I'd like to honor my father's passing with a brief history of his life. My parents met in Cincinnati in the Unitarian Church in the mid-1950s. They married there in 1957 on August 17th. My father grew up in Boston and went to Boston Latin School. He came to Cincinnati first to work at Procter & Gamble as an industrial engineer, and then to go to the University of Cincinnati Medical School in the early 1950s. After marrying, they moved to Boston for my father's internship in internal medicine at Boston City, Massachusetts General Hospital, and then after to a research position at Harvard Medical School. Sandy and I were both born at the Mount Auburn Hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1964 and 1960, respectively. Sandy, my brother, is now a sculptor. See his website at sandymacleod.com. Both of our wide-ranging interests reflect my father's active, open thinking. My father loved Cuttyhunk Island a lot. He came here first as a school kid in 1943. We started coming to Cuttyhunk in 1966, the year we moved to Hamden, Connecticut, where my father took a position at Yale University, working on the development of group practice and community health plans at the Yale Medical School. Cuttyhunk Island has been a place of continuity and community for my father and mother through a number of moves in their lives prior to their move to Pittsburgh in 1973. My father was Cuttyhunk Island's principal doctor during his vacations in August each year in the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, and provided medical advice for many who needed it for free. My parents moved to the Washington, D.C. area in 1971, so my father could work on the beginnings of the federal health maintenance organizations under Elliot Richardson in the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. We stayed there until 1973 when my father took a position at the University of Pittsburgh in the School of Public Health. During the 2 years we lived in Bethesda, Maryland, we spent 6 months living in Geneva, Switzerland from 1972 to 1973, utilizing a Ford Foundation grant to study the health systems of 3 European countries in Denmark, Germany, and Britain. While at the University of Pittsburgh, my father, in 1979, was asked by then-Governor Dick Thornburgh to serve as the Secretary of Health in the state of Pennsylvania. Thornburgh picked my father for this position because he had already set up a federal health program and was recommended by a close advisor of his. Soon after this appointment, 12 days after, the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident occurred in central Pennsylvania. My father, the official responsible for managing the health issues, later openly criticized the Thornburgh administration's lack of preparedness for 2 main reasons. They didn't have any physicians on what was the equivalent of Pennsylvania's Nuclear Regulatory Commission to bring forward health considerations in planning for the existing nuclear plants. It only had engineers. And Pennsylvania didn't have any potassium iodide stockpiled in the event of radiation exposure, such as that which occurred at TMI. My father resigned a year or so after the accident occurred and continued to speak and write publicly and critically of the country's preparedness for nuclear accidents. In the intervening years in Pittsburgh, my father continued to teach about health maintenance organizations in the U.S. healthcare system at the University of Pittsburgh, and also taught medicine, grand rounds, for years. My father also continued to speak internationally about health systems and nuclear preparedness issues. And my parents traveled a number of times around the world on semester at sea voyages, once as academic dean in 1999. They also traveled on semester at sea in the summer of 2001 around Europe. They continued to travel to many other places around the world in the 90s and 2000s as well. In the last few years of my life, my father's life, my parents continued to participate actively in a Unitarian Universalist related book group. And while very independently minded vis-a-vis religion, especially those religions in the cultural fabric around my father, he was very a-religious for a number of reasons. My father identified loosely with the open-mindedness, tolerance, and free thinking of Unitarian Universalism. My father, a wit, a wordsmith, a maverick with a keen political sense, an indomitable fighter, and a punner with a very quick mind, someone who exercised his mind almost without thinking about it, like some people exercise their bodies, sustained a subdural hematoma, from a concussion, during a semester at sea alumni voyage in Belize on December 30th, 2004. Over the subsequent 3 years, he faced a number of health challenges that are a consequence of this. In the last 6 months of his life, he started to practice a little yoga, relaxation, and movement with me, with enjoyment and benefit. We both enjoyed it when he elicited the relaxation response. In about the last 5 years of his life, he also reversed his heart disease through lifestyle changes with a very low-fat fruits, grains, and vegetables diet and exercise, so that his angina went away. My father was wonderful. He was an optimist and an idealist, with a twinkle in his eye, a smile on his face, and an engaged, articulate comment about almost every situation in life. And in my experience, an ability to instantiate ideas, to realize what he envisioned in sometimes complex ways. My mother, a remarkable caregiver with a creative spirit, weathered my father's challenges in recent years and helped him in remarkable ways. My parents in their marriage and my father with his interesting mind have created a remarkable world for themselves, Sandy and myself. Although I'm very sad my father has passed away, I find some solace in the perspective that he is an unbroken link in a chain of life that extends back some 3.5 billion years, and that the challenges that he faced in recent years are in the past.
Okay, thanks for stealing my good stuff. My name is Abby Williams, and I have known Gordon and Janie since they moved to Pittsburgh in the 1970s. Gordon and my dad worked together at the University of Pittsburgh. My father, who did not suffer fools or anyone else lightly, was enchanted by Gordon. He always said, "You think Gordon's a cool guy? You don't know. You've no idea. He's amazing." And as a kid, you say, "Yeah, that's interesting, pass the peas." So when Jamie emailed me and said, "Could you maybe say a few words about Gordon and his time in Pittsburgh? I would appreciate it," I was honored, humbled, and likely not equal to the task. Because what Gordon did, started in Pittsburgh, has so affected healthcare across the country and throughout the world that although we grieve his loss and there are holes in our hearts, there are millions of people whose lives he affected by embracing change and having the strength to go for it. Now, shouldn't be surprising, since as a 20-year-old he was arrested, jailed, fined for an act of civil unrest. May come as a surprise to those of you who look at the picture on the program and say, "What a sweet old guy," right? Because he had the temerity to get on a segregated bus and sit in the back. Now, my look at this, and I've never discussed it with Gordon, suggests that it wasn't because he was acting out and trying to get arrested. I think he just didn't appreciate a difference. Why should he not sit in the back with other people? Gordon believed in equal access to health care for everybody. And his career at the University of Pittsburgh was all about how to make that happen. There was this book that he published that he allowed my dad to participate in on how to fund health care. Now, we think of managed care as a bad thing. It's a way for private industry to make money. Back in the day when this got started, it was about how to fund, either through private organizations or through the community, reasonable health care, so that we didn't have a divergent system of the haves and the have-nots. A lot of people say, well, you got bad health care because you have no money, and if you don't have a good job and you don't have good health insurance, you get what you get, because maybe you could get a good job and better health insurance. And I think Gordon reasonably said, oh no, I believe people do the best they can all the time. And there will always be a discrepancy. And our job as a medical community and a community of compassionate people is to level the playing field for things that are necessary. We're not giving you half price at a movie. We're making sure you have necessary health care. And his 30-plus years at the University of Pittsburgh was devoted to doing it, to creating it, to implementing it, to teaching it, to shouting it from the rooftops at a time when people's response was, well, why should we fund health care? You know those people. They're just going to sue us anyway. I actually read something that Gordon wrote quite recently about the malpractice crisis in the 70s and 80s as he's trying to convince big business, large industry, and the community at large to fund health care for socially or economically disadvantaged people. And someone said, well, you know, in response to this enormous medical malpractice crisis, what do you suggest? And he suggested, and again, heresy, this guy is out there, he suggested we just give safe, reasonable health care to everybody. It was this philosophy and this energy and this strength of conviction that led to the federal government passing a federal law in the late 1980s, which is the anti-patient dumping law, which requires that any person who comes to an emergency department and believes that they have an emergency medical condition will be seen and will be stabilized without regard to ethnicity, to insurance, to anything else. When I was talking to my kids, I said, tell me something cool about Gordon. And they all kind of looked at me and said, well, he had a great hat. All the pictures we have of Gordon, he's wearing this really great hat. And one of my kids said, he probably climbed Mount Everest. I'm like, what? He said, well, aren't there disadvantaged people up there too? And I think that those of us that know Gordon professionally say, where there was a need, anywhere in the country, he went, he developed a plan, he stomped his feet till it was implemented, he made sure it worked, and he moved on to the next fight.
I'm Dick Robb from Brookline, Mass. My wife Lucy and I have known the MacLeods since we both arrived in Boston for part of our medical training in 1961. Remembrances. To remember Gordon MacLeod is to think of his cheerful friendship, feel his interest in our lives, sense an inquiring mind, be surprised by an unexpected pun. To remember Gordon is to know the challenge of wanting to understand and to hear his regard for those who did. Listen to the satisfaction of accomplishment. Enjoy a gin and tonic and the conversation that accompanied it. Or share a breakfast bowl of dry cereal piled high with fruit. To remember Gordon is to know his love and regard for Janie. Realize his hopes and affection for his boys. Recall his tenacity in holding on to friends.
think of his pride in the Boston Latin School. To remember Gordon is to replay his thoughts on how to organize medical care. Believe that hesitation and uncertainty are enemies to be combated. Sense his pleasure in understanding how the world works. Know his deep happiness at Cuttyhunk and his interest in its people. Such remembrances are not easily dimmed. He was part of us, and we of him.
I'm Alistair Craig, and our family has been friends in the cause for a long time. Thinking about Gordon, talking about Gordon, you can't help but think and talk about Cuttyhunk. 40 years plus since we met in the cars. We were fortunate enough to be invited here first by John and Carmen Ward. Can't remember the exact year, I think 68, 69. But you can't help but think Cuttyhunk is not just an island, it's people. And we've met some fantastic people over the years. And the Wards were instrumental in introducing us to the island and to the people. We had a cookout on Barges Beach, I think the first time we met in the Clydes. And we had a bonfire, and Sandy and Scott, Jane and Gordon were there. And so we would sing into the sunset, dark and stormy night, and others. It was a magical evening, and it became more a family tradition. We'd all get together and go down there, light a bonfire, and tell stories.
we always look forward to coming to Cuttyhunk, and in particular, meeting up with the MacLeods again, to hear about their adventures over the previous year. There was political adventures, there was travel adventure, all kinds, just fascinating. Gordon, he was a very stimulating and certainly at times challenging conversationalist. He's a Scotsman as I am, and he's a physician as I am. And coming from the other side of the pond where I escaped from health service, our conversations were not always in agreement, however. Gordon's wit and wisdom prevailed, and we were always close friends. His failing health over the last few years, he met with great dignity and resolve, and we even managed to talk latterly about what his final chapter in life would be. And there was no doubt Cuttyhunk was where it was to be. He joins many dear friends who chose Cuttyhunk as their final port of call. And we'll start meetings.
Thank you.
I'm Reed Hendricks. Mary and I have known the MacLeods for probably since 1965. I first came to Cuttyhunk in 1947 by myself, as Gordon did, discovered this island, and later brought our families here. When Janie asked me to talk, immediately in my mind, the similarities between Gordon's life and mine. We were born just a few weeks apart in 1929. We grew up during the Depression, high in Illinois, but came East to college as Gordon did. We both loved to travel. We were both Unitarians and Democrats. Moderate. We both had sons, a lovely wife, and have enjoyed our relationship with the MacLeods through these many years. There was one point, Gordon was a wonderful, he was a personification of the public spirited person. Everything he did seemed to be tied in to the good of better, the betterment of others. He did fail in one endeavor, though. He failed miserably. In 2004, he worked extremely hard to get me to vote for Ralph Nader. He was the always ready to help doctor here on Cuttyhunk before we had our high-tech medical care that we now have. It was catch as catch can. He was always there, ready to diagnose, stitch, consult, or prescribe. He was never too busy or never too rushed to give us all the time we needed for whatever problem we had. He was that person we saw wandering up to the post office, to the store, down in the fish dock, with that wonderful little grin always on his face. Like he knew something that you didn't. That we shall miss. He did serve Scott as Secretary of Health for the state of Pennsylvania, but I remember him for was a statement which nobody in the political community really appreciated. That more people will be hurt psychologically and physiologically by that whole event. How right he was. Janie and Gordon belonged to a little group in Pittsburgh that every year went traveling. one person or one couple would select the site, plan the trip, make the arrangements, and the rest would follow along. Just stop and think what it must have taken to plan this trip with everybody's wants, desires, needs in mind, the consideration, the cooperation must have taken place. That, I think, personifies Gordon in all of our minds.
Ethel Twitchell, but I suspect I'm better known to you as Smoke Twitchell, so I will go by that name. And I am honored to be here to share some memories of the MacLeod family, and of Gordon especially. We, Jane, played tennis on the Garfield court for many years. Sandy, you masterminded a house for us that we now call the Roost. And Scott has played the bagpipes, as we have all seen so many islanders, winter and summer folk, to their resting places in the island cemetery. Gordon and Jane first came to Cuttyhunk around 1965, renting along with Mar and Ebby Patterson the house that what we all knew in those days as Piney's house, and I hope there are others of you who remember that. They shared the house with Mar and Ebby Patterson and eventually bought it and have been living there with some enlargements on a very narrow plot, ingenious ones which have made it a really wonderful house to visit. As others of you have mentioned, because the house was located, Gordon is located very centrally, as you all know. It meant that Gordon, who at that time was often the only doctor on the island, would be frequently asked for medical help. Earaches, stomach aches, backaches, fevers, and even once, I understand from Jane, removing a fish hook from a dog's, was it his tongue? His tongue. That's something now that Jane Harriet does. Their location also gave Gordon the opportunity to know many old-time island folk. Wilfred Tilton, potter, gardener, wildlife lover, and for some of you who saw him in a talent show could do a wicked jitterbug dance. I hope you all remember that. There was Alan Potter. When on his trash collecting rounds from time to time, would stop long enough to share one of his wonderful stories. And those stories were wonderful because Alan Potter was usually the butt of the joke. And of course Gordon, like the rest of us, used to traipse up to the store, then known as Mugsy's. You remember that? Then located in what was Janet Burke's house, is now Janet Burke's house, for groceries and for the occasional ice cream cone. As Gordon often traveled back to Pittsburgh for his other life, his professional life, and I guess other places all over the country, he either commuted on the old Alert, and I again hope many of you remember her, or on Norman Gingrass's seaplane. And here is one story that he related to Dave and me, and I hope I have it more or less accurately. Because he was late meeting, and I do think it was the Alert, he parked his car on a public street nearby and not the Elm Street garage. And as he was on the island for a considerable visit this time, he received a parking fine, and his car was towed to a lot somewhere outside of New Bedford. On his return, he got himself to the police station, paid his fine, paid a taxi to get him to the towing lot, paid the towing fee and the release fee. But with great glee reported that it was still less than he would have paid. Studying the Elm Street As you all know, Gordon's last few years were not easy, as he, with Jane's great and loving care, attempted a difficult recovery. But last summer, many of us remember him valiantly pushing his walker up Bayberry Hill. I also remember stopping by their house last year and finding him attentively listening to a recording of either David McCullough's biography of John Adams, or else, I'm not sure which, his book, 1776. His brain injury may have prevented him from remembering it, but he was obviously enjoying it. Gordon, you are missed by your island and many other friends, but you have blessed us all with affectionate memories, and for this we thank you.
Everybody who's spoken before. I think I've known the MacLeods since I can remember. Since I can remember. It should be mid-60s. I think every person, Gordon MacLeod included, every man, every woman, to some degree, is the sum of their stories, and we've been enjoying that, haven't we? I guess my experience of, I'm going to have to call him Dr. MacLeod. I haven't made that transition. So to Dr. MacLeod was really through the lens of my lifelong friendship with Sandy. And you know, when you're young, adults are scary things. And so Sandy and I were often being corrected from some prank or not showing up or taking too much of something or another. And that only modified a little later in our teenage years to a more acute state when we were up to a lot of teenage merrymaking and prankstering, I guess would be a nice way to say that. And then life took me away. And I lived in the Middle East and Europe for 15 years or something. And I came back, something closer to an adult, and there was Dr. MacLeod again, this time wearing that hat. And my vision of him kind of matured as well. And discovered him to be all the things we've been talking about. Intelligent and interested. I was interested in what other people were doing. Compassionate, creative, and principled. It's one of the things I admired about him. It was tough as a kid, but as an adult, now with my own children, he's very principled. So what are all these stories that we've heard, and I'm going to remind you of some we've heard, what do they mean? We heard about Elliot Richardson inviting him to start that first HMO project, 1971. I think Scotty mentioned 1974, he starts the Department of Health Services Administration at the University of Pittsburgh. 1978, he writes an important work on the capitalization of healthcare, something we all take for granted now. 1990, starts the multidisciplinary Masters of Public Health program at the University of Pittsburgh. All over and in between, they're living in the Philippines, in Geneva, they're going to Moscow and New Zealand, and probably every other place in between. What are all those things? Well, for me, they are that absolute American trait of pioneering. It's all pioneer work. Starting things that need to be started. So it's pioneer. It's all been referred to, but just to remind us, 30 years of teaching, 25 years of hospital rounds. Think back, 25 years of hospital rounds. Yikes. On the service of hospital boards, all kinds of local civic organizations, University of Pittsburgh Senate, Faculty Senate, 115 publications, won the Outstanding Teachers Award at the university in 1998, went to sea in 1999 and 2001, and what we've definitely heard loud and clear today, so many devoted friendships and colleagues. What's at the heart of that? Hard work is at the heart of that. Plain old hard work. Heard the story of the bus trip in 1949 that took place in Augusta, Georgia. Daring to sit in the back of the bus. We know he was a physician. We know he was a teacher. It's all about helping other people. Started the community health centers in Cambridge and New Haven, as was so eloquently put before, so that everyone can get access to good health. 1979, got Secretary of Health for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, 3 Mile Island. And then also there was a polio outbreak amongst the Amish people at the time. 147,000 people inoculated in 3 days or something. Incredible. Just alluded to, took some knocks for that stand on 3 Mile Island. It wasn't easy. That story didn't end well. And then when most people probably would have retired just to listen to those books on tape from 2000 to 2005, he was the director of the Masters in Public Health program. What's at the bottom of all that? Spirit of respect. Respect for the dignity of other human beings. Pioneer, hard worker, someone with a great deal of respect for other people. So I got to ask myself again and ask us, what does it mean? How can he help us see kind of beyond that, because he's part of us and we're part of him? What goes forward? I think it is pioneering element in him. He shows us that adventure is not on the outside, but it's within. And without adventure, without challenging the borders of things, civilization always goes into decay. So we're willing to go out, it starts to implode. About that hard work and some of those conversations in Piney's house. It reminds me that great deeds are born within. They don't come from competition. When we think of the women and men that have shaped our world, those ideas have come from within them. I think in all the accomplishments we've heard and know, you can see that the greatest reward of a thing well done is doing it yourself. And we live in an age where so many things are done for us. Being able to do it yourself. In that respect, in his words and in his long service, the Lord respected his family, his nation, the land, law, humankind, and himself. I think when we reflect, or certainly when I do, on all the things he's done, and it's really incredible. It was a love not so much for purple mountains majesty or those ember waves of grain we sing about. Instead, it was a love for that inner air, that inner light, that inner landscape in which women and men breathe freedom and self-respect. Whole life dedicated, making the world better for others. I'm going to end with a challenge. I'm a preacher, so I got to end with a challenge. I think you'd like this. Turn of the last century, a PhD student from Columbia University brought to Manhattan, Upper West Side, one of the Dakota peoples to show off to the department. After a few days of, I'm sure, just the things you do in Manhattan in 1905, they're walking up near Grant's tomb. And the chief reached down and found a cricket and put it in his hand. And he and the student listened to this little symphony for a while, this cricket. And the student said, "How can you hear that? And all this cars and noise, how can you hear that?" And the Dakota man said, "Give me the change from your pocket." "Change from my pocket? Give me the change from your pocket." Took the change, threw it up in the air. And as it made that very unique noise that we all know of silver hitting the ground, everybody in the street stopped and ran after quarters and dimes and nickels and pennies. And the Native American said to the student, "It just depends on what you're listening for, doesn't it?" One of the things I will always remember Dr. MacLeod for is a challenge. And that challenge is, what are we listening for in this life? Thank you, Dr. MacLeod.
concluded the service with at least hearing those strains on the piano have been that song has been included in your bulletins. The cruisers are going to sing through it once, and then everyone can repeat that. Okay? Do you have the pitch? Ago, a certain philosopher once wrote, "For everything there is a season, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." I suppose we might also add a time for sun and a time for clouds, and I think I, for one, am grateful for this cloud cover. But the one constant, I think, that is part of the refrain of that litany from Ecclesiastes is that there is a time for everything. And Sandy has graced this place of Gordon's burial with a way to mark and measure and treasure the time we are here to give thanks for Gordon's life, but also a way to represent the timeless and eternal spirit in which humankind participates. This sundial is exquisite in research, in design, and in the execution of its creation, like creation itself. However, we might want to debate the particulars of that. It's really perfect for Gordon, combining the precision of its purpose and an invitation to look beyond its purely functional to a deeper meaning and the appreciation of life's mysteries. The Latin inscription, for which we thank Janie, non sine lumine, means not without light, and would remind us of our search for truth within the confines of time and space, but grateful for this sacred space. There is an inscription on a sundial at the University of Virginia which reads, "Time is too slow for those who wait, too swift for those who fear, too long for those who grieve, too short for those who rejoice. But for those who live, time is eternity. Hours fly, flowers die, new days, new ways pass by, love stays." Surely love is as constant as the progress and marking of time. Our love for Gordon and Gordon's love for us, and especially his love for Janie, Scott, and Sandy. Thinking of the sun and thinking of these ashes we're about to commit to the earth reminds me of an astrophysicist, who once observed that you and I are literally animated stardust.